So now the stage is set for our next session. And with that, we have another fireside discussion for all of you. And it's a very, very interesting discussion that we have right up. And for this, first, may I request Dr. Arun Singh, Global Chief Economist of Dun & Bradstreet, to come and join us on stage. Can we have a round of applause for Dr. Arun Singh? And our second speaker, all right, I see we are still exchanging visiting cards, so maybe we can take our seats and continue with the exercise in the next break. Can we do that? We can take our seats now for this session. All right, our next speaker we have is Mr. Shachindra Nath, founder and managing director of UGrow Capital. Can we have you on stage with us, sir? A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Mr. Nath. And now, ladies and gentlemen, can we all please take our seats? And I would request Dr. Arun Singh to start the discussion. Over to you, sir.
Good evening. Can we start? Thank you. So welcome, Mr. Nath, and it's really pleasure for us to have you with us. And I think before we begin, I just want to give us some context why we're discussing actually. So in DNB, last 30 years, basically we are talking to MSME community. We reached every corner of India, most of the cities, most of the cluster, many MSME we basically spoke, and we basically talking about how they are doing, what are the various challenges they are facing. Most of the company, they have many challenges in their growth journey. And one or two, it's very consistent challenge they have is basically credit, is a finance. And that's why basically, Mr. Nath, UGrow and DNB came together to do some joint study to basically understand what are the real issues and challenges, MSME is facing, how we do address, what are the basically credit gaps, what is basically availability, what they are doing, how they are basically getting money from the banking, the formal source, what are the challenges they are facing, what are the constraints they have, and what are they basically are doing to navigate those constraints, and what are the basic collateral requirements. Lots of questions we had, and we thought, let's collaborate, let's do the research, let's do some finding, and then UGrow team had some primary survey on their customer base. They found a lot of good insights. So this discussion is all about, and we just want to leverage the expertise of Mr. Nath into this space, in the lending space for years, and to get the perspective that what MSMEs are doing, how they are basically navigating this challenge, how they can do this one. So thanks, Mr. Nath, to be a part of the panel discussion, and we are happy and delighted to hear lots of insight from you. And there's a couple of things that basically, before we start, I just want to ask a very basic fundamental question about this report. Do you want to share some insights from this report? What are the great things we basically, it's coming out, it's positive, and what are the concerns MSME is facing in the lending space? What's your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Dr. Singh. It's a very good question. Actually, this report is on everyone's table. Some of you would have thought that, what is this report about? Normally when you publish a report, when it gets circulated, people carry it and then leave it in, somewhere, because, who will take the pain to read a report, which is also for a boring subject called MSME financing. So first and foremost, we did this report for one single purpose. Some of you might not know about UGrow. We started around 5 years back with a very difficult time. We established UGrow as a leading MSME financing company. We raised almost now 1500 crore of capital. We have a loan book of almost touching 8500 odd crore in a very extremely adverse scenario. When DHFL has happened, Yes Bank has happened, credit crisis had come. One of the reasons why we did that, because हमको हमेशा ऐसा लगता था कि when it comes to consumer financing, you have a leading player. When there are gold loan, there are three leading player. The CV, vehicle business, for everything there is a large lender, and obviously banks are there for everything. But when it comes to MSME financing, there is not a one single name which can be seen as doing the problem of credit. हिंदुस्तान में करीब 90 लाख करोड़ की टोटल एमएसएमई क्रेडिट की डिमांड है. Only 22% of that is formal. 60 odd lakh crore of credit is not given. After building this business in the last 5 years of 3.5 years, one of the narrative, and we found very confusing, when you go talk to a banker, when you are talking to an AGM of a public sector banker or a very highly educated and professional class of a private sector banker, the media, the journalists, पहला क्वेश्चन आता है ये एमएसएमई तो बड़ा खराब होता है, इसमें ना 10% का एनपीए होता है. And we kept saying no, that is not true. So I was sitting there and DNB just put it on LinkedIn and I reposted that and I reposted this with this title, MSME अब अच्छा है. So the whole purpose of this report was DNB's prowess of macro, and what we are seeing for the 1,30,000 of MSME customer, that MSME बदल गया है. The force of digitization, the formalization of MSME economy and formalization of this customer is taking you to the same level. Today no lender actually worry about giving a consumer loan. RBI कितना भी चीख चिल्ला ले, but the vigor to continue doing a personal loan and a consumer loan and all of these payday loans and everything is it still full force. So RBI, when it increased the risk weight, every lender said we will absorb that cost, but no, it's all okay. We want to do it. And the same lenders you go and ask MSME financing, they'll say no, ये तो बहुत ही problematic है. So we want to bring the confidence back and we want to paint a different narrative that what you have seen in last decade or so for consumer financing, for other method of financing, the MSME financing actually gives you the same set of opportunity. And please wash away this old memory of MSME matlab 10% ka gross NPA. That is no longer the case because the underlying data is demonstrating that has changed.
Okay, sorry. So I think thanks for this one. I think the narrative shifting, and we need to change the narrative just from showing the victim to basically looking at how we can support. And there are basically great opportunities. But and just to flip the conversation around the credit, basically credit requirement. So we have a demand and we have a supply. Unfortunately, there's a gap. Huge demand, but unfortunately, it's not met through the informal source. And as a result of that, formal source, as a result of that, most of the MSME goes to the informal route. They pay huge interest. So what lenders are doing, like you, to ensure that this credit gap are basically coming down and gradually we meet to what we call the equilibrium point, the demand meet the supply.
So I think so MSME financing in India is the same place where the microfinance was around 20 years back. Right? Remember first microfinance company when it was created, who would have ever imagined that in deep West Bengal or in deep Kerala or deep Andhra, you can give a loan of 30,000 rupees to a fruit vendor or to a technically a blue collar worker, and that loan, if you leave aside the crises, but that loan would continue to perform, and would continue to grow. Same was, look at the housing finance business and affordable housing finance business. I think so the challenge is that time changes, but we don't change with the time, right? What was the problem? Why there is such a massive credit demand? The massive credit demand or the gap was a function of how the customer was. So I keep giving this example. Think of a customer in Rewari, and then a bank credit officer 6-7 years back goes and says that I want to give you a loan of 1 crore rupees. Your EMI is 15 lakh rupees, and customer would normally say, भैया इसमें से सिर्फ 3 लाख रुपए का EMI तो मेरे बुक्स में दिखता है, 12 लाख का तो आपको असेस करना पड़ेगा, because that was part of his cash economy, right? And the poor credit officer comes back to the head office or the zonal office of the bank in Delhi, files a report saying 3 lakh rupees informal source of income, 12 lakh rupees informal source of income, and somebody in head office calls and says, you've gone mad, that you think bank would do a lending to a customer on the informal source of income for which we have no record. The customer segment has remained like that for a very long period of time, because for him that 30% tax save was basically going to his bottom line. 10% margin for MSME, 30% of tax save, 1 crore turnover, 40 lakh rupees of income. But this changed when the first demon happened, then force multiplier of GST came in, banking getting formalized, and there is a generational shift happening into MSME, wherein MSME have now realized, and I won't say it has changed completely, but there is incremental change is happening. The same customer now understand that if 50% of his turnover is in GST, he can incrementally take credit and increase his turnover from 1 crore to 3 crore, which means the 10% margin will give him the same profit pool which otherwise coming from informal sources. This shift is unrecognized by mainline lending institution. And that's why, if you look at NBFC's growth towards MSME financing is threefold of the bank's growth. But we should not worry about whether the credit is coming from bank, from NBFC, as long as it is coming. Right? So I keep hearing this narrative that banks are not doing their job, and they are outsourcing their credit to NBFCs. They should do the credit of their own. But that is true for microfinance also. Why banks shouldn't do microfinance on their own? But because for everything there is somebody who does it differently, I think in this the time has come wherein banks are predominantly liability institution. They have source of capital, and fintech, NBFC, whatever you may want to call it, they are constantly innovating and being able to understand the problem of credit for MSME and tailoring it. Everyone is doing it differently. For example, we at YouGrow has invested very, very heavily in data analytics, in creating a platform which is called Grow Score, which underwrite the customer purely on basis of the GST banking and bureau data. Then we specialize in 9 sector and 100 subsector, and we have diverse channel and product to service the need of credit for a 15 lakh to 15 crore turnover. We think so that's almost 30 lakh crore market opportunity. So this the gradual, once this fear, psychosis ki MSME karenge to loss hoga, once this goes away, I think so this decade and next decade, you would see massive explosion of credit to MSME, means massive explosion in the job creation market and the economy. This whole shift from 30% of GDP to be contributed by MSME to go to 40%, and this massive target of making India as a $30 trillion economy would happen on the back of MSMEs in India.
I think that's a great point. I think talking about the last point on MSME's contribution to GDP is around 30%, and the target is to be something around 50% by some time. So which means to happen that, I think next 5 years, the incremental GDP out of 100 produced, 75% of that has to come from MSME. Huge task. And that's basically the money when basically talking about since evening we started the conversation. Everyone is talking about the capital, need of capital for the economic growth. So, but in your experience, when you deal with MSME, what are the basic or fundamental challenges they are facing in raising the capital? What they feel, what they're basically saying that how they are not able to raise the capital?
Yeah, so it is actually it's the same. The challenge is like this. There was a guy who was making tubes, and he was making tube for last 15 years, and now his next generation has come and he's become aspirational. He's saying, "Ab tube se tire banate hain." Goes to a bank branch and say, "Sir, I want a loan for now manufacturing tires, because I have been manufacturing tube for a very long period of time." And bank manager tells him, "But तुमने तो कभी टायर बनाया नहीं." तो उसने बोला, "सर, पर तभी तो मैं आपके पास आया हूँ, आप पैसे देंगे, मैं प्लांट डालूंगा तो मैं टायर बनाऊंगा." इसे नहीं, पहले आप टायर बनाओ तब हम आपको पैसे देंगे. So this is the problem. This is the problem of the credit institution not relying on ability of a customer and providing him incremental credit for any of his expansion. And this is a customer segment which is completely lost. Today also, there were 2 sessions happening where we talked about that we should make consent-less GST. No, that's not required. we have not come across. We have today, actually in last 4-5 years, we have looked almost 30,000 crore worth of loan origination. We would have actually touched almost 7 lakh customers, of which 1,30,000 are customer. Other than 2, 5, 10, nobody said we won't give you a consent for a GST. Obviously it's complicated, it's technical, but nobody bothers about that. They want money, and for money they want to do anything because it's other alternative. So when we talk about retailer financing, think of a large manufacturers like Havells, and when the summer season come and the retailer has to buy 100 ACs, they buy it on the basis of 3 rupees sacra, 4 rupees sacra, 5 rupees sacra also sometime. For that guy to get credited 18% is a completely different ball game together. So I don't think so that is required. What is required is to figure out this. So for MSMEs, there is threefold challenge. First, the level of digitization and adoption of that, and they accepting and benefiting from that is still very low. And for that, more work need to be done. Today for them it is fairly complicated. We tell this to all our customers that if you can use a Google map to reach to a destination in the smallest city and town in India, why that your mobile is not linked with your Aadhaar? Why is that your GST OTP goes to your chartered accountant and not to you? So small things. So adoption of digitization is extremely required. Second, access to market and creation of digitized marketplaces so that people can become fairly more competitive is required. And third is credit is required. Basis these two.
I think all that need government policies, measures to support that piece. And I know you talk to policymakers, regulators, and the government body quite often. And what are the main focus area you feel that the government is basically emphasizing to support these MSME sectors? What are the core couple of areas where they are putting their weight behind?
Dr. Singh, I can't name it, but post we published this report actually went to almost every ministry, every secretary, and some of the very key or very highest echelon of decision making called us on one-on-one discussion. And I went over there and I started making this presentation, what we have written in the report, why MSME is good. So after 20 minutes, somebody very senior said, we know this, but आप लोग देते क्यों नहीं है पैसा? So मैंने कहा okay, but I said, 70% of the banking in India is controlled by you. He said, वो तो करते ही नहीं, अभी क्या करें? What can we do? See, one thing you should remember. If you look at the worldwide, what has happened in COVID? If you look at the United States of America, if you look at Europe, when the COVID came, every government in the world actually supported large corporates. Big hospitality, the airline industry and all of that. You come to India, who was supported all through the COVID period except in the last? MSME. Any scheme which was brought in India during COVID period was for protection of MSME. And why governments do this? Because today, government and policy makers and politicians have to win back and come to the power on basis of, different form of vote polarization. Sometimes caste, I am from UP, and every poll data is cut across, Kurmi kaun hai, Thakur kaun hai, Yadav kaun hai. All of that is done, and basis that massive data analytics is being done, and basis that, people are garnering the vote. But what is the largest voting bloc or population of this country? MSME. Governments know this. 15 crore people employed by MSME, which means 22 crores of voting population. And if that voting population you can take to 30 crore people, in this country, governments would be formed basis the MSMEs. So I don't think so that by intent, government have any problem in facilitating the support, but they are asking what can be done. So I was asked this question, can we do an NPCI or a UPI moment for MSME financing in India? Can the government do something? Is that like money is now getting transferred from one mobile to other mobile because of an NPCI establishment and UPI being created as an infrastructure, it can be done. And I said, sir, there are multiple ways it can be done. But first and foremost, there has to be more awareness to be created that MSME अच्छा है. But believe me, I think so multiple types of policies are being formed to to increase the incremental credit to MSME, whether it is CGT MSME, probably you would not know, for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, there is a 100% guarantee scheme of Government of India. All form of mudra, the GST, Sahai, there is cash flow based lending. In bits and pieces, there are many things are being done, but I think so industry, the government, the policy maker has to come together to unleash the potential of this sector. And all of us have to work together towards that. But first is you have to believe that this is अच्छा है.
Thanks, Mr. Nath. I think we can see the changes in terms of the policy on the ground, a huge policy shift, and there are really resolved, there's a really commitment of the government to solve this problem for permanently. Now, I know we are running short of time, so I have one last, my favorite and the fundamental questions basically. Now, everyone speak and talk about the potential of MSME. There is huge potential. Some of the area you feel in terms of growth opportunities, growth potential, which MSME can show or they have today, and how one can utilize that, please?
So, as you know, India is largely a service sector economy, where there is a massive focus have been on the manufacturing, but actually we have to have a balanced view. We should not overweight a manufacturing to services, because in a tier 3, tier 4 town, you can't set up too much of manufacturing unit. Biggest opportunity for small businesses is to solve and be part of massive supply chain ecosystem and serve the local economy. So I think so somehow all of the MSME feel that they have to compete with the big giants of the world, and we have to tell them, no, that's not true. I give this example. Actually, I was in Rajkot some time back. I came back to my head office, and in Bombay, I called a group of 50 people. I said, मुझको एक question बताइए, राजकोट में 50 floors से ज़्यादा की कितनी building होगी? Somebody said 5, somebody said 2, somebody said none. But actually, Rajkot has 57 towers, which are more than 50 floors. And I think so that is the power of our cities and town. And that's why MSMEs have to serve the local economy and become fairly powerful. And that I think so is the opportunity they have to take by hand. And India is not just one country. India is thousands and thousands of Singapores, multiple Hong Kongs, and each of those small places would now grow in many fold, and MSME have to serve that economy.
Thank you, Mr. Nath, for sharing your insights. That's wonderful and the great, unique insights you shared, and I'm sure that everyone had enjoyed that. And unfortunately, time's up, so I'm sure that you will have lots of questions for us, but I think we can take it after. He's available, after some time, so we can ask him later. Thank you for part of this session, and thank you for listening.